What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fantasy Flex Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, and today we have a very special golf episode covering a tradition unlike any other, the 2025 Masters Tournament, teeing off this Thursday at Augusta National. Joining me today, two very special guests. First up, we've got my longtime colleague over at Roto Grinders, an expert in all things DFS. The man, the legend, better known by his fantasy handle Notorious. Welcome to the show, Derek Farnsworth. How's it going?
What's up? I'm doing good. Excited to talk some Masters, best week of the year for us golf fans. And I've been following your stuff for a very long time. So finally getting to work together. It was a pleasure, my friend.
Likewise. And this is going to be fun. You're obviously, both of you, because I'm about to introduce the second guy. Y'all are the experts here. I'm just running point. But the second guy we got joining us, Action Network contributor, two-time Fantasy Sports Writers Association Golf Writer of the Year and senior PGA analyst at Rotoballer, Spencer Aguiar. Welcome. What's going on?
Not too much, Chris. As you said, this is the tournament unlike any other. This is Golf Super Bowl. I am very excited to be doing this show with you today, doing it with Derek, and I think there's a lot of good information that we're going to be able to go through for it.
Absolutely. We'll go through a course overview. We'll talk some lineup construction, your favorite picks, of course. So we'll get into all that. Before we do, just a reminder that we've teamed up with Draftkings here, and we're going to dedicate this entire episode to getting you ready for the Draftkings $10 Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest. And because the battle for the jacket is heating up in Augusta, and there's no better place to sweat the action than Draftkings Daily Fantasy, the ultimate destination for fantasy golf fans. For the year's first major, Draftkings is giving all customers a shot. Play for free for a $1 million top prize with your next $10 deposit on the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app. It's simple to play. Build your dream lineup while staying under the salary cap. Sit back, watch as your players rack up points. Every birdie, every bogey, every clutch putt. Feel the intensity of every shot. Derek, tease two golfers you're most excited about this weekend for DFS.
I'll go Minwoo Lee and Sergio Garcia.
Spencer, how about you?
I'm going to double down on the Minwoo Lee answer, and I'm going to give Robert McIntyre.
All right. So you guys heard it here first, but we'll get into more of that. Just download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app to play free for a shot at the $1 million top prize with just a $10 deposit. That's for all DraftKings customers. Just download the Daily Fantasy app for your free shot today. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $10 deposit required. One single-use $10 ticket rewarded for Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest that expires on April 10th at 7 a.m. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Sponsored by DraftKings. So, all right. Obviously, if you want a shot at that $1 million, follow the link in the episode description and check out the DK $10 Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest. And even if golf isn't your top sport, that's why we got Derek and Spencer here. So, Derek, I'm gonna start with you. Just what makes the Masters unique as a DFS sport?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's the most special major of the four. Everyone wants to win a green jacket. And the course is just unlike any other. I mean, tradition unlike any other. The course is unlike any other. It's beautiful. It's the best thing to watch all year. And yeah, it's just such a tough test because you get so many uneven lies. You get a lot of elevation changes. You get just so much difficult green complexes that you can't afford to three putt. You got to know how to chip around the greens. It's not like any other golf course on the PGA Tour where you're just chipping out a thick rough. Here, there's basically no rough. You have the second cut, and then you have the pine straw. And so you got to use a lot of, imagination around the greens. And as we'll hear time and time again this week, it's all about experience at Augusta National. It's why you'll get the random 50-year-old in the top 10 heading into the bag 9 on Saturday. He'll never finish there, but he'll be up there at some point on Saturday. And yeah, it's just everyone wants to win that green jacket. Rory McIlroy's been chasing it his whole career. So yeah, it's my favorite. It's everyone else's favorite. Can't wait for it. And it's an extremely tough test of golf too. This isn't going to be, winning score in the 20 under par range. It's going to be probably low teens, and it keeps getting longer every year. It's almost up to 7,600 yards now. So bombers definitely have an advantage when it comes to the par fives and some of the other holes as well. So yeah, a lot to love about Augusta National.
And Spencer, talk to me a little more about Augusta National. The course itself, in terms of DFS here, Derek started talking about it, but what are you kind of looking at when you're setting your lineups?
Yeah, I know this is not typically a golf show that you do, Chris, but Augusta National might be the only venue that we could all come on and discuss about that, whether you are a casual fan of golf or you're a diehard that watches every week. It doesn't take very long for everybody to get on the same page here. You've probably heard about the azalea flowers that are at the property. You have pimento cheese sandwiches that are, as cheap as can be out there, but you're going to hear about it over and over again throughout the entire week. And then at the end of the day, as Derek was talking about, everybody is vying for that coveted green jacket. It's the pursuit of excellence and perfection. And it's what Derek mentioned of Rory McIlroy's last little thing that he needs to get the career Grand Slam that we seem to have the discussion about for every year for the last 10 years here. But I think for all the knowns of this course and the overall predictive return that we do see yearly, there are probably some extra issues that come into play just because it is such a predictive venue from start to finish of what we see every single year. You're going to see podcasts, articles, all the same stories getting repeated over and over again. I wouldn't necessarily call that a bad thing for a contest like we have here for the $10 Fantasy Golf Millionaire on DraftKings. I think avoiding groupthink mentality probably does help some of your upside potential in that area. But this is always going to be one of those boom or bust majors because contrarian takes very quickly land you extremely far on either end of the spectrum. Derek mentioned this a second ago. I think the very first answer that you're going to hear over and over again is these wide open fairways and what this means. And a lot of people deem it to be this long driver's paradise. I do want that to be something that everyone keeps in mind throughout the week, but it's not as if that's the ultimate decider for success. If you look at a name like Bryson DeChambeau, there's nobody in golf who's longer than he is. He's only had one top 20 in 8 appearances at this tournament. That came last year in his 8th attempt. And a lot of that probably stemmed from a really soft layout that ended up being done in 2024. So I think for me to kind of answer that question, Chris, it's this massive undulation, the multiple tiered perspective of the putting surfaces on all 18 holes. You need to have the ability to overcome a venue that's going to shrink greens in regulation. It's going to enhance around the green play. And it's one of the reasons why a first timer has not won this tournament in their first go around since Fuzzy Zeller in 1979. Wouldn't necessarily consider that a death sentence for DFS. There are some players that we can talk about throughout the show, but I do think in a world of trends that are usually wildly overvalued by the general public, there are a couple this week that hold more merit than usual. And that is why we kind of have gotten a lot of these outcomes recently. If you look at the last 6 or 7 majors, it's kind of been Chalk City over and over again.
Yeah, and speaking of Chalk City, let's talk a little bit about lineup construction. And Derek, how are you building lineups? Because when I kind of go in there and I'm not really up on a sport as much as you guys are, I'm just gonna hit the first couple of names and see how many studs I can jam in. And it looks like you can only do 2, which is generally kind of how it goes. So how are you building your lineups? Who are you building around at the top or in terms of value plays?
Yes. So obviously you want to base your lineups on whatever contest you're in. We're talking about the $10 Millionaire Maker. You're going to have a different strategy for this one than you will if you're playing against, 100 guys in a different type of contest or 50-50, something like that. You want to try to avoid duplicated lineups as much as you can. We talk about this with every sport. And the way to do that, you can either get really unique But as Spencer mentioned, a lot of chalk tends to hit at the Masters. It's just how it's going to be. Corey Connors has been the chalk here every year the last 6 years, and he's hit like 4 of those 6 years. It's just you're going to have to probably eat some chalk. And so the way to get a little different would be to try to avoid the popular combos. So if you're starting with Scheffler, I probably wouldn't have like the second highest owned guy as the next guy in your lineup. You want to build uniquely around the chalk. And then for me, the larger the contest, the more I'm willing to leave on the table. If you just leave like $200 or more, you're probably going to be different than 95% of the field. So that's a couple ways for you to get unique with your player pool. In terms of the actual golfers that I like at the top, it's hard to go against Scottie Scheffler. I mean, obviously, nobody's won here back-to-back since Tiger Woods in 2002. I love throwing in a Tiger stat anytime I can. Favorite golfer all time. But, yeah, I like Rory McIlroy. It just feels like his year, you know, coming off of a couple big wins at Pebble and then at the Players. He seems to be in a better, you know, mindset heading into this year's Masters. He's probably going to be in the mix. He might end up, you know, melting down like he has time and time again on the back nine at a major the last few years. But, man, his game's trending in the right direction. He's the best driver in the field, maybe other than Bryson. I think they're pretty close. And he's the guy that I'm picking to win this week. So I like Rory. Don't mind looking to Jon Rahm. I know he's not a popular guy right now because, you know, he went to Live and, you know, it's kind of been – haven't really heard from him since. And hasn't won a ton. I think he's won twice on Live, but man, he's been a top 10 machine every single week over there. And I think he's a guy that, you know, could definitely contend, and he wants to be back in the mix. You know, if you watch any of his YouTube stuff, I like the YouTube golf stuff. He's just so motivated to get back to being known as one of the best golfers in the world. And I think this is a good stage for him to prove it.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask both of you guys about some of the lower owned guys, the flyers that you like. But before we get to that, I just want to talk a little bit more about lineup construction and Spencer. So I'm just curious, when you build a lineup, are you starting with your studs or your high price players and kind of building around somebody, or are you kind of locking in those values first? Don't tell me who they are, even if you are, but just kind of how you go about constructing lineups for the Masters in particular.
Yeah, so I build around a core always, depending on where they are on the slate might vary. I think what Derek said was very on point. I don't want to reiterate all the same thoughts that were said again, but I think a couple of things that he said that I would like to double down on is I've always said that contest selection and understanding the deviations between those contests are really the most critical variables in winning at DFS. He talked about it. The fewer participants in the contest, the less outside of the box you need to separate your build. You get something like what we have here that we're talking about, more players in the field. You do need to be better at finding low-owned hidden gems or using those unique ideas to try and push your lineups away from everyone else. One of those best ways to do it would be just to leave extra money on the table. I think if you look specifically here for the Masters and we're talking about this tournament, you know, rollover predictability of this course has always made those answers very complicated. Like, I will use a different sport answer. I know we keep going, like I've said this before, like golf is my forte, Chris. This is what I always push towards. But like this would be, look at March Madness this year. You get all 4-1 seeds into the Final Four. Very few upsets that happen early on in the event. There is still potential, though, to find leverage, even in a really chalky tournament to where, you know, you have Houston over Duke and all of a sudden you've created leverage for your bracket there. But I think that's something that you at least need to keep in mind, that when you, whether you're playing this contest or whatever it is out there, be aware of contest selection. For me at the top, and I've come on a lot of shows, Chris, over the years, and I've given the Rory McIlroy answer over and over and over again. Maybe this is good news for Derek here that I'm not going to give the answer this time because it's never actually come to fruition with it. I think Scottie has been a little bit disrespected at the top. I understand it's been a slower start to the year. He suffered a mishap towards Christmas time. It's been a little slow burn for him. And it's a more wide open Masters, in my opinion, because of it. I write an article every single year and I talked about it. You know, trends are sometimes lazy narratives that you can put into the game. But when we look specifically here, one of the articles that I write is it's called The 7 Deadly Sins. And what I'm trying to find is, what have golfers not been able to get themselves over the finish line in the past? And what are those categories? And what are those metrics that prevent somebody from doing that? And When we look specifically at Rory, there was a category, and there usually is a category that prevents Rory from getting across the finish line. And for me, that was 3-putt avoidance. We will see if he can get himself across the finish line this year. He is in the best form, or arguably the best form he's been in leading into this event during any of these times that he's had. So it's hard to say Rory is not an exceptional player, but I do think that when we look at final ownership for DFS, my guess will be that Rory ends up being more owned than Scotty, which is kind of a surprising answer. Really like Derek's call on Rahm. I think whether it's Rahm or Koepka, you might be able to get a little bit of leverage in those two spots. And then if you're looking to be outside of the box even more than that, Xander is another name, Xander Schauffele, that is, to where injuries to start the year has not looked like himself to begin this season, but I did think that in his last start, he started to flash some of those distance totals that I would like to see in the build. So I would say Scotty at top for me, on the top for me, if that's what I'm trying to build. And then if you're looking for leverage, probably Koepka, Rahm, and Xander.
All right, yeah, because we were talking a lot about Scotty and Rory there for a minute, so I'm glad you guys threw out some other names. So now I can get to building at least the top of my lineup. But let's keep it going. Let's go in order, and we'll end with the you guys' favorite low owned guys, cheap guys, flyers, dart throws, all that stuff. But Derek, mid range plays. Who are you looking at? Kind of in that let's say, that 8K range, maybe a little lower. Anyone stick out there?
Yeah, so mentioned Minwoo Lee off the top, coming off the win in Houston, a guy that one of the longest hitters off the tee in the field, and he's finally starting to flash a little bit with the irons. He's never been, a great approach player, but he's always had a good short game, and he's had some success here too. I mean, he was T14 in his debut, finished top 25 again last year. And it just seems like not a lot of people are going to be on him because he feels a little bit overpriced. So I don't mind looking to him at 8,500. I do like the Xander call that Spencer mentioned. He gained 11.2 strokes on approach in his last start. That's a career high. So a guy that won 2 majors last year, I know he's not in the 8Ks necessarily, but we have him projected for like 8% ownership right now. We'll see if that ends up holding up throughout the week. But the guy that I really want to be overweight on, one of the better major players in the field. And then a couple other names in the 8Ks. I really like Patrick Cantlay. I haven't played him a lot over the last couple of years. He was on the players board and dealing with all that. It seems like he was kind of distracted by everything with LIV and all that. But he's been playing a lot better. Over his last 5 events, he's gained nearly 16 strokes on approach, including 6.5 strokes ball striking last week. Had a bad week with the short game, but a guy that feels a bit underpriced at 8,700. And then I'm going to do it. I'm going to go back to Jordan Spieth at 9K. This is the tournament I play him at every year, and then I don't play him again until the next year. He's just a guy, for whatever reason, loves this course. Did miss the cut here last year. Didn't get into the API. He was pretty mad about that. And he's played some pretty good golf. He's had 3 top 15s in his last 6 starts this year. So I think he could be interesting. He's usually the chalk at this point of the season because everybody plays well in at Valero, and then everybody's ready to get back on him. But it doesn't look like that's going to be the case just because he's so expensive this week.
Spencer, any thoughts on Spieth? And then who else you like in the mid range?
And for what it's worth, Spieth, and it's every single year with Spieth that with this answer at the Masters, he's one of the guys who survived my 7 Deadly Sins article that can win. So I think that no matter what kind of form he's in, there is the skill set that fits this course very well. I mentioned Minwoo Lee and Robert McIntyre earlier. You can make stats do a lot of funky things to tell any narrative that you want. The thing with Minwoo, though, is, and it's, if anybody follows my content, you will know I do not back Minwoo Lee very often. I always worry about the approach play. The short game that Derek talked about is always in play. But 2 weeks ago, when he won in Texas, I had Minwoo Lee at 50-1. Very surprised every single time that you get one of those outlier answers of a golfer like him that ends up popping to the front of the model. He was the 2nd projected win equity player in that tournament for me. Not going to be quite as high this go around with it, but I agree with what Derek said. I think that there is this perception around him that the price tag is a little bit too high based off of this victory. But when I was talking about stats and making them do what you want here, there was only one golfer in my model that when I looked into proximity from 200 plus yards, you're going to get a lot of shots from that distance, driving distance, weighted around the green production, and weighted putting. Min Woo was the only golfer to land top 15 in both of those, all four of those areas there. So I think Min Woo's ownership is going to be something for leverage that you can find an upside with him and real win equity. McIntyre, on the other hand, I've seen his name floating around a lot. I do think he's going to be more popular than I originally thought here. He graded 6th in this field for me over a 2-year running perspective from that 200 plus yards range that I talked about. And then he also ranked 4th for a very key category that I ran this week. It's one of my favorite categories to run every Masters. Essentially what it takes is birdie opportunities and aggression for this course, and then bogey avoidance if you want to salvage a score. If we date this back for the last 6 years, when I've looked at this, every single golfer that has won this tournament has ranked inside of the top 10 of my model the week that they've won. McIntyre, 4th in that category this week, is going to be right there. And the other thing that comes into play for him is there has been a left-handed bias at Augusta just because of the shot shaping nature of this course. We've seen 6 lefties win here in the last 22 years. I think a lot of that spells out really nicely for McIntyre. And then the one name I'm going to give, which I'm a little sad about, I would love to hear what Derek has to say about this, and maybe he can give a little bit of rebuttal on the other end. We talked about distance quite a bit, and this is not a golfer that's going to pop as a distance golfer. I will note, though, that when you put him at some of these longer tests, I have seen about a 5 to 10 yard increase from him. Going to be very, very, very popular for DFS. That's Russell Henley. I think Derek's point of being careful of who you pair Rory with or Scotty with, this is one of those prime examples there. But I wrote this article to begin 2025 that I thought Henley was a legitimate top 10 player in the world. We saw him win at the API. I was fortunate enough to have him there also. And I think this might be one of those spots, and maybe this is a better gambling and betting and outright answer than anything else here. I think the general public has started to catch on in the betting sense of the word, but I still, sorry, for the DraftKings sense of the world, but I think for betting here, you still have some prices here at 50 plus that are very intriguing for Henley. So I would love to hear what Derek has to say about Henley.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that if you like stats, you like Henley. He's accurate off the tee, one of the best iron players on tour, and then he has that elite short game. I didn't think he could win at API. You know, I play him a ton in DFS. He's one of those high floor plays that you can trust each and every week, and, you know, came out one at a Bombers track. So if you can do it there, I certainly think he could do it here. I do think he's going to be popular. Rates out as like the second best point per dollar option in my model this week, and I'm sure everyone else's models are probably going to rate out the same way. So I'd like him for sure. But like you said, I do think you want to build a little bit careful with him. Probably don't start, you know, Rory or Scheffler and then go down to Henley and then go down to Connors. Like, you're just running into too much chalk. And so, yeah, if you're playing Henley, you know, maybe play one of those other 10K guys that we mentioned in John Rahm or Xander. That way you're starting a little bit different from most of the field.
And Derek, are you kind of building like, you know, when you're kind of laying out your exposures, are you going with kind of more of those lineups where it's a little bit more kind of contrarian with some more mid-range guys, or are most of your lineups still going to be kind of, you know, the guys we talked about off top, Rory, Scotty, and a bunch of cheaper guys?
Yeah, so in every lineup I build, I want at least one guy that I actually think can win, you know, and it's easy to, you know, pick 10 guys that you think can win, but man, it just doesn't seem like there's that many in the field this week. So I will be starting most of mine with Rory or Scotty or Rahm. And, you know, we've all been around long enough. We probably are one of the few people in DFS that, you know, were around before optimizers. We had to hand build lineups. So I'm a hand builder at heart. You know, I like to go through, and it's a little bit easier to kind of differentiate that way, because when you just run optimizers, it's hard to set enough rules unless you know what you're doing to get away from those popular combos. So yeah, I'm going to try to do that as much as I can. I'm probably not going to do 150 max, but I'll do like 20 lineups this week. And then that way I can go through, hand build them myself, and try to get those unique combos that I was talking about.
All right. And I'm going to come back to you. But Spencer, you know, Derek just talked about that differentiation. Let's talk about it. Who are you using for differentiation, especially if you know, click that salary button and sort by lowest first? Who are the cheap guys, or just one that you really like in terms of low ownership and low salary?
So there's going to be a lot that is undergone over the next 48 hours when it comes to ownership. When you're more than, we'll just call it 24 hours away here, like there's a lot that can change from start to finish. One of the things that I always look at in my model is I take the projected price tag that a player should have in my model and I compare it to their actual going rate. So not all of these names that I'm going to mention here are going to necessarily be contrarian. I can tell you off at the very start of this answer, a name like Patrick Reed is going to be one of the most popular players. But when I look at the 5 most underpriced golfers for me and who they were on the slate, this is in order of how underpriced they were. Keegan Bradley was number 1, Patrick Reed number 2, JJ Spawn 3, Michael Kim 4, Denny McCarthy 5. I am really interested to see where the Keegan Bradley ownership ends up landing. It's a little bit higher as we're filming this right now than I would have initially anticipated for it. There is a lot to like about his game for this course, and there's also a lot riding on the line for him this season with him being the Ryder Cup captain. So, if we can get this Keegan Bradley ownership to go down a little bit, I think Bradley's going to definitely end up becoming a staple of my builds if that's the case.
All right, Keegan Bradley. Derek, before we get out of here, let's hear who you got. You're just talking about the differentiation. You heard some of Spencer's guys, who you got in terms of, those 20 lineups that you're building, who are going to be some of those key guys.
So like Spencer, Keegan Bradley, number 1 guy in terms of most mispriced in the field. And it's kind of funny when we have like these majors, it's the one week where we almost overthink it. Sometimes the early week chalk guy ends up being lower owned because everyone tries to overthink it and then ends up fading them. That doesn't happen most weeks because everyone listens to their podcast like Wednesday night right before they're building lineups. So we don't have that like reversal of chalk. So I'm hoping that Keegan doesn't get too popular. Guy that's got that elite tee to green game, back-to-back top 25s at the Masters. So he's my favorite as well. In terms of like lower owned guys, I like Sergio Garcia. I hope everyone's just going to see his most recent course history at Augusta National. Ever since he's won here, he's been really bad. Miscut, T23 miscut. So I'm hoping that that's kind of going to help lower the ownership. But if you look at his form over on Live, he finished 3rd at Doral last week, won in the event before that. He's been playing great pretty much all year. His driving metrics have been solid over there as well. And then for the really ugly play, I'm going to go Cam Young, a guy that I never get right, never treats me well, but he's a bomber. He's finally showed a little bit of life last week at Valero, T18 there. He's got back-to-back top 10s at the Masters. So if we can get him at less than 5% ownership, he's a guy that I like in the Millie Maker.
All right. So, the battle for the jacket. It's heating up in Augusta, and there's no better place to sweat the action than Draftkings Daily Fantasy, the ultimate destination for fantasy golf fans. And for the year's first major, Draftkings is giving all customers a shot to play free for a $1 million top prize with your next $10 deposit on the Draftkings Daily Fantasy app. It's simple to play. Build your dream lineup while staying under the salary cap. Sit back, watch as your players rack up fantasy points. Every birdie, every bogey, every clutch putt. Feel the intensity of every shot. Derek, remind us, who are the 2 golfers you're most excited to have in your DraftKings lineup this week?
Minwoo Lee and Sergio Garcia.
And Spencer, how about you?
Robert McIntyre and Minwoo Lee, and then the bonus answer of Keegan Bradley. Keep an eye on his ownership.
Gotta love it. We got bonuses. DraftKings got bonuses. So download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app to play free for a shot at the $1 million top prize with just a $10 deposit. That's for all DraftKings customers. Just download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app for your free shot today. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY at 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. 18 plus in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. Minimum $10 deposit required. One single-use $10 ticket reward for DraftKings Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest that expires on April 10th at 7 a.m. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotion, sponsored by DraftKings. All right, Derek Farnsworth, Spencer Aguiar, thank you both for joining me here on the Fantasy Flex podcast and breaking down the 2025 Masters Tournament. Derek, tell everybody where they can find you at.
Yeah, I'm at Roto Grinders. All my stuff is up there. You can also find me on Twitter at RG_Notorious.
And Spencer, tell everybody where they could get your work at.
So you can find me on Twitter at TOffSports. You can get all my models. If you like any of the numbers that you heard, you can get those over at Rotoballer. And then I'm going to be starting a new show this week over on the Pat Mayo Network. So be sure to check that out on Wednesday.
All right, there you have it. Shouts to Pat Mayo. And of course, shouts to our partner, DraftKings. And remember to follow the link in the episode description to get started on their $10 Fantasy Golf Millionaire Contest. I'm your host, Chris Raybon. This is the Fantasy Flex Podcast. Best of luck and enjoy the 2025 Masters. Let's get this money.